Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Data Unchained. I'm your host, Molly Presley. If you're new to Data Unchained, or perhaps you don't know a lot about this show, let me tell you a little bit about what created this podcast. The idea of decentralized data has been ongoing for the last several decades. If you can think back to when mainframes came about, they had massive buildings and everything around the data, the infrastructure, and the users of that data were kind of consolidated around that one mainframe. Fast forward over the next several decades, we've had the advent of cloud computing, powerful processors, and everything as small as, sensors and our cell phones. And now we have the onset of a very distributed workforce and AI engines that are scattered in all kinds of different places that people are trying to put their data to use. So in this podcast, we delve into what are some of the challenges with decentralized data, the opportunities, and as well as some of the tools that are out there to help you to put this data to work. So without further ado, let me introduce you to today's guest. Jami McGraw is the Director of Technology at Arrow Electronics. He's a part of the Arrow Intelligence Solutions business. Jami, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Molly. Good to meet you. I appreciate you welcoming me on here.
Yeah, great to have you. So before we talk about Arrow and technology, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end out in this kind of role in high tech these days, and kind of what really drives you in this AI driven world?
Sure. So first, I go back with Arrow almost 15 years. I actually started out as a customer. I was a customer of theirs. I had a startup that focused on the M&E, so media and entertainment, visual effects, graphic editing, film editing, audio editing. When you talk about like disparate data silos, right? Like that's like chock full of it. So my experience there was as a startup was we developed workstations and servers and devices that facilitated that editing capability. Fast forward now almost 15 years. I've been with them for 11 as an employee, 4 years as a customer. And in today's age, I find that the disparity in centralized data has become more and more prevalent, right? Like you mentioned, we've seen the evolution of the mainframe PC, and everything was sort of in one spot, and now we were so important, self-important during the big data, and big / big oil almost craze, right? That we've created data everywhere, and we were so cool in connecting it, but now we've got data all over the place, and like, how do we merge it together? So thanks for welcoming me here, and looking forward to getting into this conversation.
You bet. So a lot of our listeners do come from the M&E space. We've had quite a few guests from the M&E world, as you can imagine. So they'll be happy and be able to relate to a lot of what you do. But I know your scope is much broader these days as far as the markets you cover. Tell us a little bit about Arrow. I know that a lot of technology companies, resellers, integrators know you well, but maybe some of the end users don't know you as well. Could you just tell us a little bit about the company as well as the business that you're a part of?
Absolutely. So Arrow Electronics, we are sort of a broad company. We focus on technology. We have a division that focuses on components, think resistors, transistors. We have a group that focuses on more of a common distribution. That's our ECS business, and I am part of the Arrow Intelligence Solutions business. And our role is really to bring appliance, application-based specific compute to market with people, really OEMs and ISVs, people with intellectual property that want to bring an appliance or a platform to market. We function as a facilitator to help them bring that platform to market.
Let's delve into that a little bit. How has the evolution of hardware kind of come about from your perspective? I mean, it seems like you can't pick up a magazine and not hear something about whether it's a new chip, a new transistor, a new GPU, whatever it is. Are we at a pinnacle of the evolution, or is this just a continuum that's going to continue to accelerate?
It's funny you say that, like, and like AI, right? Like, I feel like you have to say AI in today's modern age, right? But it really is like a paradigm shift. And I think what's unique for us here in this day and age and for this generation is that this paradigm shift is unlike any we've seen before, Molly. And I say that in the context that we've seen like bumps in technology, right? Yeah, this is a little faster. Hey, this is a little bit more storage, but we haven't seen the paradigm shift where technology is having a degree of autonomy. And anytime that man has sort of found themselves not at the helm of the machine, that's when you have this weird sort of trough of disillusionment. And there's actually a real thing called the 4 Ps of innovation, right? There's placement, there's product, there's process, but then there's paradigm. And this paradigm shift here, think of like cell phone, right? Like we all had that long cord in the remote phone, but then now we hold the whole world in the palm of our hands, right? And so that paradigm shift, we've had very few of those in our lifetime. AI is bringing that forward. And what it's bringing with it is sort of this need for exponential compute increases, right? So we think x86 architecture for the nerds out there, that's like a very traditional computing platform. But now we're seeing the advent of GPU increasing side processing. We've heard the term APU, NPU, TPU, and what it means is like we're seeing almost like a divergence from the similar path where traditional compute has been. And we're seeing this need for exponential compute. And I'll give you an example, Molly. If we think about large language models, everybody's talking about is some form of a GPT, right? Large language models, we've had this concept for many, many years, right? But we've only just recently had the compute to be able to process that, to train these models, right? So I think we're sort of unique where we are in our generation because our rites of passage, as we've grown and as we've gone through life, we're sort of paralleling this like analog to digital world. We're going from, newspapers to MapQuest to satellite positioning, right? We're going from a cord phone to a remote phone, like the cordless phones, to flip phones to smartphones. So I think we're really in an interesting time generationally, and you bring AI in and all of these sort of leaps and bounds in technology. It's really a unique time for us to really be experiencing technology.
So I have to say something is personal and kind of cute. My mom still calls her maps on her phone her MapQuest, which I kind of love. You know how sometimes my MapQuest took me the wrong way, Molly, which I do love.
Right.
But we've had to, through our generation and even our parents really see so much change. One of the things that the CEO of Hammerspace, the company I work for, talks about a fair bit is, and it really kind of maps to what you're talking about with the cell phone, is that idea of imagine when you had a smartphone that could have data accessible anywhere. You don't really care where your photos are. You don't have to back them up. You either click the box or not to protect it. And you have infinite storage and even some AI built in to tell you, search for all photos with a horse or with this person's face. And we've become really accustomed to this over the last, 5 years, 10 years in the consumer space. And that was driven by the exact same thing you're saying, more processing power that you could put into a consumer device. And we're seeing that now in the enterprise or the business world and kind of at scale. So it's kind of interesting to see how we've actually been through this a bit. And on the consumer side, it just wasn't marketed in quite the same way.
No, and it's so funny you say that. Like you're right. Like we have anything and everything accessible, and I think that's almost like a quick, like, not to be like kludgy, but like that's almost like an ode to like the Hammerspace name. Like I'm a comic book nerd. Like I love media, things like that, and so like for like Hammerspace, and I'm for the listeners out there, I'm sure you probably know, but like Hammerspace is sort of that like universe that you pull things out of, right? Like think like Looney Tunes, like Wile E. Coyote would pull like the Acme stuff out when he was chasing a roadrunner, but it's really true to today because we're pulling data out of everywhere. So I really love the namespace Hammerspace that you guys use. I think it's really kind of clever in how you guys are speaking because it is relevant to the sort of placement of data all over the place. And yeah, we're using it, we're accessing it, but like it's all over. Like where no one is cognizant of like where you're accessing it from. It's just you're pulling it out. I'm pulling it from
Yeah,
cool.
It's interesting. So let's talk about compute a little bit more. You kind of enumerated off a bunch of different kinds of processing units and different acronyms and forms. How does a customer or somebody designing a workflow decide? What is your feeling on? Is it just go buy GPUs from NVIDIA if you can get them? Or is there enough knowledge out there now to know, different ones work for different types of workflows. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think it's a bit of the Wild West, right? And I think when it comes to AI, right, there's sort of stages and progression of AI. There's the start where you're talking about a training of a model, and you're loading loads and loads and loads of data, and you're training this model, and maybe you're training it in the cloud, maybe you're training it on a GPU, maybe you're using CPU, right? Then there's the actual, when you take this model, I've trained it up, now I need to put it into use and practice to infer some decisions, right? I'm going to use my artificial intelligence to infer a decision, right? And that's the inferencing aspect. And that hardware set might be on a different hardware, like that compute, the acceleration requirements to be able to infer or inference might have different requirements. But then there's also, what was the application written to, right? And what libraries did the software team write to? Are they writing, and so it is very much the Wild West. And so I think that there's probably a huge gap, especially for software vendors and OEMs who are looking to take a platform to market. They have this great concept, a great intellectual property, but the decision of picking the right hardware. You said something really funny, like NVIDIA, like if you can get them right, and sure, like supply chain and life cycle and things like that. These are things that, like, as a company who's writing an application to do a specific thing, often is not considered, and then it's time to go to market and meet your channel, and that's a rude awakening, and it's a lot to decide upon on, like, how do I take now my product or my platform to market. So yeah, it is the Wild West. It is changing daily. We're seeing new players coming into the game. So I think it's probably never been more important to think of these things earlier on than, as you're sort of at the genesis of your idea, so.
Yeah. Hammerspace does interesting things with getting data to where you want to use it, helping you know what data you have, but you still have to choose a hardware platform. And a lot of our customers express openly the fear of, I'm about to spend all this money. I can't rely on what my peers have done because, like you said, it's the Wild West. Nobody's proven, like, here's the right infrastructure to use, and you can't go wrong with it. That kind of analog doesn't exist in the AI world because everything's so new and so many workflows are different. So I think it's interesting to see people are having to be very bold with their architecture decisions, even sometimes deciding where am I going to spend budget. Are there ways or tools that you can find or help people give access to help them be more confident in their decisions?
It's funny that plight is broad, right?
It
And
is.
that's
It
sort
is.
of the purpose of our intelligent solutions, right? And that is really what we do. So when you think about sort of what we do programmatically, our goal is to help you get those customers out of proof of concept, right, and into an actual solution, right? Because there's the qualification process that you'll do where you're evangelizing Hammerspace. Hey, Hammerspace is going to, we're going to centralize your data. We're going to get rid of the silo villain, right? And we're going to move that into. But then there's the aspect, right, Molly?
So you have read the comic book, haven't you?
I'm not kidding. I am a comic book nerd, and I love Data Dynamo. Like, real talk, like, there is like a legit situation that happens where, okay, proof of concept, we love this, but how do I t-shirt size this? And
Yes.
maybe my one facility requires this, and my next facility requires this. And so, like, the small, medium, large, extra large, like, one, that sizing is important. Two, even if you do size it correctly, does it have the lifespan? Does it have the support? What's the support infrastructure? Who can I call if something goes wrong? Like, and honestly, the test of a relationship is when something goes wrong. So, and you guys as Hammerspace go through all that work. And if a customer gets a platform and it doesn't function correctly, your platform's broke, right?
Right,
And so
exactly.
there's an importance there in that selection of appliances. So I think you asked about specifically, like, what tool sets exist and how do we sort of. I think the tool sets for us and our go to market is the relationships that we have. And that relationship starts with the architecture firms. So, and I say that in the context of those making the silicon, those making the chips, the ARM, the Amperes, the NVIDIAs, the AMDs, the Intels of the world, right? Those who are making chips, understanding their roadmap, understanding the availability, right, and what that supply chain looks like. And then that goes linear. It goes into who is making the platforms that these chips are going into. And what is the scale of that? What is the storage capacity? What is the networking infrastructure? What's the life cycle? Does it have 6 months left and it's going end of life? Will it hit a supply chain skid in 6 months and now you're waiting 18 weeks or more? So those are sort of like, we leverage our relationships, and that's sort of where we found our purpose in helping to get these application makers like Hammerspace to market in the right fit with the right platforms that are going to make your route to market, that last mile to your customers, easy to transact. So yeah,
I love
I'd say
that.
relationships.
Yeah.
It's number one. Yeah.
But you hit on a couple of key points that I was hoping we could touch on. So I'm going to kind of just break those down. So technology obsolescence. We have a partner who's helping us doing some benchmarks, and this is related to, you have to show benchmarks so people can size properly and understand how much infrastructure you need for different throughputs and IOPS and things like that. So this partner of ours was already queued up and ready to start to run the benchmarks, and the processors all of a sudden were obsolete overnight due to a new announcement. And they're banging their heads against the wall because now they have these processors that are effectively not super valuable in the most modern workflows. So I love the idea that you guys can help with just visibility into what's coming. I mean, I'm sure you have folks who sit on roadmap calls all the time to understand what's coming from all the different vendors. But how is that exploited? Is that done through the VARs and the resellers and you sharing with them? Is that something that's done through end users or with end users? Can you share a little more? How would someone get insight into that?
Our customers, right, or folks who are working with us would get assigned one of our resources. So we're very deliberate in the way that we work with our customers. We're very deliberate in the way that we work with our partners. So one, it is the folks that, yes, like they sit in those roadmap meetings, right, and they're analyzing that. But I think what's unique about Arrow as an organization, one, we have access to our components group who are part of that supply chain. So I think that there's information available to us that sort of sets us apart from the competition, that allows us to bring that benefit to our customer base and to our channel, right? I think the other piece and how we bring that forward, it's that future reconnaissance that happens in dialogue early on. If we're proactive, and I think that proactivity is what sets us apart, right, versus reactive. If we're reactive and we're dealing with it after the fact, like we're going to do the best we can, but it's the damage is done already in that engagement. When we talk about like our solution architect team and our engineering teams, who their responsibility is to not just sit in those meetings to be aware of those, but to sit down and help with the planning with folks like Hammerspace, so that we are helping you or your customer base, whether it's the reseller channel or those VARs, to help them as customers to guide those decisions for year 1, year 3, year 5, and beyond. And it sounds like sort of like cheeky, but like that's why our mantra is 5 years out, right? Because we need to have that future reconnaissance in what we're looking at, because it matters. It matters. The decision you make today matters a whole lot in how your go-to-market succeeds in year 1, 2, 3, and beyond.
So I think another piece of what you all offer, and we are announcing bundled solutions with Arrow, around the time that this podcast comes out. And I want to touch on that a little bit, less from the marketing of the bundles, but some of the background work going on there. That Hammerspace has found that while customers love the idea of flexibility and design your own solution to your specific needs, it is also very hard for them. Even if they can make a bespoke solution that has exactly the memory, the processor, the storage, whatever that they want, often it's very difficult to procure that and get it in fast enough that by the time they design it, spec it, get the quotes out, go through that whole process. They're just moving a little bit too slow to keep up. And that's something that Arrow really helps with, that this idea of t-shirt sizing and pre-configuring recommended bundles that will give you a feel for, okay, I have this super throughput intensive training job I'm doing, or IOPS intensive iteration, or whatever it is, to help a customer know where to start. But then take that a step further. How do you all help in predictability of delivery times, and how can a customer feel more confident that once they make the decision and say go, they can get their infrastructure in fairly quickly?
I've said the relationships piece, and I think the relationship goes a long way, both in our relationship with Hammerspace, right? So as we work with you and we understand what the channel looks like and the demand is, that proactive advising really helps. But let's talk in the case of unexpected situations, right? We have a global footprint. So we have integration centers that are global. We have distribution centers that are global. So we're able to leverage that infrastructure and that network of, I'll call it the bat phone, right? We have the network of bat phones that we can pick up the phone because we do have the clout with those key makers. So we have the ecosystem that is global. So we have the infrastructure, we have the centers for integration. So we're able to leverage that. And I think one of the examples that we had was like during COVID, when like really that was the supply chain scenario was probably the worst I've seen it in my career.
It was a
And
disaster.
again, we were able, it was, but and not that it was all peaches and sunshine, but we definitely were able to leverage our footprint, which is a global footprint. Those bat phone numbers aren't just North America, right? We have inside of our key partners like Dell and HP and Lenovo and Intel and Nvidia, and the list goes on. We're able to pull that together. Not to mention, we also have the operational team and staff that are familiar with this stuff. So there's a bit of like anticipatory and collaboration with folks like Hammerspace on the demand that we can say, okay, we expect this much. We're going to lay down the law that we have a pipeline established, and we're able to leverage, if we run into a roadblock here, we're able to leverage other avenues within our global distribution network and also our sister companies inside of the other business units to really understand like what's happening on like the chip level, on the resistor level, on the board level, what's happening on the platform level, and how do we navigate and circumvent some of those roadblocks that other people may encounter because they don't have the ability to leverage their operational team and also their internal business units quite like Arrow can.
Okay, cool. And I think it's worth talking a little bit about, is it the cloud that will be the answer? Is all of this moving, when you think about flexibility of supply chains and procurement and hardware and all that, is a burst the cloud or just move to the cloud the solution that you see people going towards? Or is that not really the, end result that we think it's going to be at 5 years from now?
I'll give you my tea leaves on this, right? And I think I think there's enough data in the industry to support this, Molly. The hype of the cloud and everything going to the cloud, I think, has been sort of like debunked. I don't foresee everything going to the cloud for a myriad of reasons. One, because of the inferencing we spoke about a little bit before. As we start to evolve artificial intelligence and use artificial intelligence, not as like its own sort of like bespoke, like this is an AI, like everybody thinks like humanoid AI, but if we think about it in the context as a feature inside of things we use every day, you mentioned like the cell phones, right? There's a little bit of AI inside your cell phone and will increase, right? The inferencing aspect in very specific industries where data is kind of all over, right? And let's think of like healthcare, industrial 4.0, defense, oil and gas, media and entertainment, places where things like data integrity, cyber hygiene, those are major factors of why we won't just be in the cloud. Latency on decisions, the things we infer out of our AI, maybe it's not a standalone, maybe it's just a feature inside of something we use every single day, but we will not be able to leverage that AI inferencing properly with latency to and from the cloud. There's also costs, which is a big aspect of that. So I think all in, we will probably see things come back from the cloud or function in more of a hybrid capacity, where we do have a footprint at the edge for certain aspects. And I think, again, the inferencing is, to me, the number one thing that we're going to see explode into full utilization outside of the hype cycle into more of a day-to-day utilization. Inferencing to me is the big one. It's not going to be just cloud. It will be either an edge-based function or a hybrid function, which also means that there's data all over the place.
Yeah, data moving around. and
It's
and
all over.
it is. Data's all over. It needs to be moved to where you want to use it, whatever that location is. And we've already found, and this actually goes back to some of your historical experience in the media and entertainment space, that while it wasn't AI, they do a lot of computing. When they render images, render film, massive, huge compute clusters that they're running for days and days. And they've already bumped into the challenge of, I want to render a film. I'm a London-based studio, and there's no power to power any more compute. And so they had to go somewhere else. And granted, it was to own the infrastructure somewhere else that had power. Nonetheless, they needed to move to where their compute was. And it seems like there's a lot of analogs in AI there. Maybe your models change. Maybe which type of processor you want to use is going to change 2 years, 5 years from now. And being able to know which data you have, like you said, in kind of this matrix that's spread all over the world, and move it to where you want to use it is super helpful.
And I think that's where, like, the features that Hammerspace is bringing to market is really important, right? Because, like, mo data, mo problems, right? Like there's lots of problems there with having disparate silos of data. And I think the example you gave of like media and entertainment, broadcast, when you talk about like media asset management, when you talk about electronic health records, EHRs, right? That is like huge problem. And you have data and files that are in different formats. You have the NAS and the SAN and the, well, oh my, like, and I think that's where what Hammerspace is bringing to the table is really the ability to put an umbrella over all these different locations and allow them to be leveraged properly. So that centralized approach to what you guys are doing and leveraging via your metadata servers, I think it's a huge benefit to the market. I think you guys are going to help a lot of industries get their arms around, these changes. And just like you said, like we have cloud, we have hybrid, we have on edge, on prem, like we're going to need to see that. And I think you guys are probably at a very good time with the intellectual property that your application brings.
Awesome. Hey, Jami, so as we tie up, I want to ask you one more question, maybe get back out your genie ball. You said you guys are looking 5 years forward. Where do you see all this headed 5 years from now?
Oof, that's tough.
Impossible question, but it's fun to kind of think when folks like you are looking that far ahead, where do you think it will go?
I mean, 5 years out, we will need to function in a completely hybrid environment at all times for key industries, especially the enterprise. I think we'll see the commoditization of certain aspects where they will go cloud only, but I think the hybrid model for data is going to be most prevalent. I think we're seeing, by 2025, right, we're talking about 75%, I think a Gartner report said 75% of data will be created and processed outside of the traditional data center and outside of the cloud. So again, 75%. And that's a year from now, right? And you guys have like guys like Ray Kurzweil who's saying, by 2030, the singularity is going to be here, right? And so we're going to be having not just, we are going to be leveraging technology internalized as humans, right? So when you think about like that type of exponential growth that we are going to see, I think ChatGPT, the future version they're talking about is doctorate level intelligence at launch, right? So when you talk about all of these aspects of AI will have a continuous training, right? So the decisions it infers at the edge today and in use today will then take that data and send it cycled in maybe to the cloud for future training and for augmentation and future learning. And then the model improves And then you have zero touch provisioning, pushing it down. And there's a constant cycle of data. And as AI continues to grow and learn, we're going to see this constant cyclical washing of data from cloud to prem to edge and back. And so, like, specifically what's going to happen in 5 years, we're going to see a constant cycle of data and teaching and training and growing our AI applications. And that will facilitate the need for things like Hammerspace, the ability to get our arms around all of that data. Where we go in 5 years, I think we're going to see data everywhere, but not in silos.
Hey, Jami, thank you so much for joining this call. We're excited about the partnership that we're launching together, and this has been a really, I think, informative conversation. Really appreciate you joining the show.
Got it. Thanks, Molly.
Thanks for listening to Data Unchained, powered by Hammerspace. To learn more, visit hammerspace.com. If you have a guest you would like to hear on the show, email me at molly@hammerspace.com.